recording. So good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Social Housing Roundtable. My name's Matthew Baird. I've been running these now for 2 and a bit years. And as you might have seen, I'm going to be hosting the CIH Southwest event in Bristol in September. So I hope to see many of you there. The idea behind setting up these roundtables, well, originally it was during lockdown. It's so that I had somebody to talk to because day to day I am a recruiter. I have set up my own recruitment business 2.5 years ago now, and wanted to make sure I was trying to do things in a different way that wasn't just all about the money. So set up these roundtables, and as of this week, we actually went past 600 members, which is amazing. It's growing all the time, and I genuinely can't thank you all enough for the support that you've given. Many of you in here have also used me for recruitment and will actually back that I'm actually all right at what I do. So the reason these stay free for everybody is because of that recruitment business and you guys utilizing me for it. So if anybody is looking for support, please reach out. Moving on to today. I think Hony and I probably met through LinkedIn or via Lara. It's usually one of two ways is how I meet a lot of people who come onto these roundtables. And I'm delighted to, if anybody missed it, say that she's running for CIH Vice President this year. So that was an amazing announcement beginning of this week. I'm going to pass over to you to actually introduce yourself and today, because I think it's such an important topic that has been built, I think, through your career. It's unfortunately not the first time we're discussing this topic. I know it's certainly not the first time you are, but it's something I'd love to see us make a real impact with today. So without further ado, I will pass over to yourself. I will start going doing some side admin, but if I can help, then just give me a shout. If anyone has questions or anything, please feel free to raise your hand during this today. We want as much discussion and collaboration as possible. Without further ado, Hony, over to you.
So good morning, everyone. It's great to see so many familiar faces. I can see my ex-bosses still sitting there, my people I managed before. So it's such a great place to be here. So thank you, everyone. Especially thank you to Matt. And we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. We were at the CIS conference and said, oh, honey, we should do something together. And then I said, what should I talk? And we started talking about a number of things. I said, oh, can I talk about housing? Can I talk about a board member roles? Or can I talk about, any other stuff? And then I said, bullying and harassment is something really bad in the sector. And, it's not nice. Leaders need to be really setting by examples. And we started talking. And then Matt quickly said, honey, we should do this topic, because it was really very much like, sorry, my presentation just gone off. Very much like, it's actually Matt's idea. Let's fix this. So I'm really glad we are talking this topic now, because when I spoke to a few people, even like directors and senior leaders, they told me they left the jobs because of bullying and harassment. Then I realized it's a big issue, and we may need to start talking, having conversation, so we may be able to address this issue better as well. So, okay, I'm trying to get the presenter view. So hopefully, Matt, can you see the presentation well?
Can, that's all good.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. And I just want to say a bit like disclaimer, I'm not a HR expert, but I'm going to talk from a leadership angle. So I think it's important. I know there are quite a few HR experts here. So I really appreciate your input, and we want to make sure it's like a conversation rather than me doing all the talking. So I'm going to go to the next slide. A bit about me. I did, as you say, in my CIH campaign, some of you read my statement and my video. I came into UK 30 years ago. I was born and brought up in India. So obviously, my first job was in housing. So I never worked in any other sector. So I know all about housing. I didn't know anything when I came into housing. I came into as an admin assistant for Elton Housing Association. That was my first job, and I'm really proud to say I'm the chair of Elton, and over the last 18 months. Elton is a very small housing, specialised in sheltered housing in Croydon. So please check out Elton's website. So I'm also a co-chair of Wish London, and also director of Wish. And I'm a mentor of Leading from Front. Obviously, I'm a chartered member of CIH, Institute of Leadership member as well. So my campaign, I'm going to talk a little bit about my campaign. So my title is Let's Regain Our Housing Sector Reputation. So as you know, we had some really bad, over the years. I would say the last 6-7 years, sadly, start with the Grenfell, and then recently with the baby, sadly passed away. There are some really bad stuff happened, and we need to fix our housing sector. And there are so many great things are happening in the sector as well. I haven't met anyone not committed to their work. Obviously, we're getting things wrong. How can we learn from that? How can we fix that? So the present campaign is about develop an industry where young people are inspired to work. So we want to get more young people come and work with this housing sector as a career, and also where existing workers like us feeling proud of our achievements. So how are we going to do that? Because obviously, how are you going to measure? Because it's one of the things you say, how we get this right. So through stories, because I feel stories are a powerful way of telling how good we're doing as well. So it's not only fixing our problems, also sharing stories, because I've seen so many great work everybody's doing every day, helping our customers in different ways, solving problems. So this is more about helping our housing providers to tell stories, and more open and accountable to our customers and take pride in our work. So please vote for me if you haven't voted. And and I just want to say thank you to lots of people already shared and commented and wish me good luck. And I want to say, I got 3 more weeks to do the campaign, so I really appreciate your support. And if you're not CIH member, please consider taking the membership if you work in the sector as well. Okay, so I am going to talk a bit about the bullying itself. So I'm going to kickstart with a survey. I know I have experienced bullying at work when in junior roles as well as senior roles. I know how challenging that can be. How can it make you feel? So I want to start with a small poll. Have you experienced bullying at workplace? Yes or no? So hopefully, yeah.
You want me to do the poll in here, or do you want to do it?
So what do you need to do? If you've take your phone and go to menti.com and enter the code 54552030. All you need to do is put the code, and then it will say yes or no. So if you can click yes or no, that would be great. As I said, I have been experienced, so my vote would be yes.
You've closed the presentation, Hony?
Yes. Yeah, I had to look at the polls now.
So did everybody get the number okay there? Who hasn't? No, what was the number, Hony? Because it went too fast for people to type it in.
Oh, okay, so let me go back to the number again. It's 54552030. It's menti.com, MENTI. I will put in the chat as well in case if you're not getting it.
Jubin's done it for us. That's great. Thank you, Jubin.
Is that the right number? Just make sure I got it right. 54.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so it's going up. Okay, so we got 17 people voted so far. If it's no, please do put no, because it's great to hear some people hasn't experienced. That's really good.
Any changes in the vote?
Okay, just looking at the scoring. So we got We've got
Predominantly, yes, it is,
17.
isn't it?
I don't know, can I share this?
Yeah, we can see that. We can see that.
You can see, okay, we got 17 yes and 2 no's. So that does show that out of 19 people voted, is a huge proportion of people felt bullied at work. That's really, really sad to hear. So we're going to do another quick audience participation. How did it make you feel? You know, I can say when it happened, I had to give you another code in a minute. Obviously, I was feeling quite angry, upset, frustrated. So the code is the same, Aventi.com 54
That's the same one we've just put in.
2030. Yes.
So do the same code again.
Yeah. 5455 2030.
That's the same question, which is, have you experienced bullying at work?
Oh, is it not coming with the?
It says on the side to change the slide. When you change the slide, the new question will come up, I think, on the website. I think that's what it says. Wait for the presenter to show the next slide.
Okay. Is it coming? How did it make you feel? How did you make you feel? So that's the next question. So are you getting that? So have you got, it's the same code number. Is it coming out?
It's still coming up with the old question for me.
Same
for me as well.
Oh, that's
not changed.
We'll have to miss that question out.
You
need to move it along on your Mentimeter presentation. Move it to the next slide on your Mentimeter.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I thought it would come like a word cloud and you will get different words. That was I was hoping to find like the feelings, how it made you feel. So it looks like it's not working. So I'll go into the next slide. Is anyone wants to put the comments, or do you want to come up and talk? How that made you feel, if you're comfortable, or you can put something in the chat.
I don't mind sharing.
Jabin, thank you.
Yeah, I don't mind sharing. I think there's different types of bullying that I've experienced, but I think one of the ones that's quite interesting is when I was a new team leader, and I was actually bullied by someone in my team that I managed. And I think that's something that you don't necessarily, and so how that manifested specifically is there was, I had a team meeting and the person was addressing some performance issues and had kind of gone around to everybody in the team. And so there was like this group and everyone was telling me about myself in this meeting, a bit like, just all my team just telling me how bad I was and how wrong I was, and one by one, going around one by one, and it was, how was it? It was horrible being sort of the kind of center of a group of people saying things, and it was interesting because after the meeting, a lot of them, apart from the ringleader, came up to me individually and apologized and was like, I don't know what I was doing, I'm really sorry. And then another example, which might not be what you mean, but I've had that with residents. So when I was a housing officer, if you're in resident meetings, and again, somebody might have a personal vendetta and then say, right, let's attack when she comes, and so you're in this meeting and everyone's kind of going at you. And in that meeting, I remember I had a boss. My boss was there, my director actually, so he was quite senior, and just let it happen. So they were angry about something that we were doing, some work we were doing in their building. They didn't like the color of the paint or whatnot. And and I felt very he didn't support me in that meeting, sort of let them just tear into me. And then afterwards, like, oh yeah, you know, sort of take one for the team. That I never got over that. I felt really disappointed, and I found that sometimes when you're a manager, people assume that you don't get bullied. Anyway, so I've talked to a bit, but yeah.
You haven't at all. I really, really appreciate the input. There's also, I know Claire said she's going to come in. So Claire.
Oh yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Javine. I'm similar that it's been from different places and from, you know, maybe where you wouldn't expect it. And it's made me feel from feeling useless and thinking, oh, I can't do anything, I'll give up, to actually I'll show you and I'll prove that I can, and everything in between, and a combination of those and everything you can imagine, really.
I know a lot of the people I speak to, quite often people feel disenfranchised with work and don't really realise it is bullying until I almost talk people right through it all. And we have those conversations. I'm like, you're aware that behaviour isn't okay? It's like, oh, that's just how it is. I'm like, well, it shouldn't be. Joe, I've seen you put in the chat there, you'd be happy to come in and share. So thank you if you'd be happy to.
Yeah, so I experienced bullying when I actually worked in HR. So that was hard because it was indirect at some points, but then there was some direct points, and I had no one to go to. So that made me feel very useless. It made me feel very angry. It made me not want to carry on my profession. But then I did find someone I could raise it with. But the point was, a lot of people in HR, you assume because you work in HR, you know how to handle it. But you don't. It's actually a lot harder because you don't know who to go to.
And was there quite a lot of support there, or was there none when you kind of tried to raise it?
No, there's no support. It was senior management in HR, so
You were stuck. I'm really sorry to hear that. Vina's put in the chat there that that reverse bullying scenario is depressingly a common occurrence, Jubine, and she's investigated quite a few herself. And Sharon's mentioned there that she had a similar experience. I was seen as difficult because I challenged the approach. In addition, I was also challenged about why I should be feeling this way because of my job role. Like you, I didn't get over it, and resulted in me leaving the sector to recharge. I still have days when it triggers me. Natasha, if you'd happily come in, that'd be great.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I've had the same thing, where in fact I was actually blamed for it. I was blamed for being bullied. Literally, I was told it was my fault and that I have to change myself. And I thought, well, what am I doing? Am I doing everything the right way? I'm following processes. I'm doing everything. And it resulted in me falling very, very ill, to the point where I left.
And there's so much of this I'm hearing, unfortunately, people leaving the sector because of it. And I think one of the most upsetting parts, and this is just as unfortunately a man saying this, is that when this was signed up, we tend to get oddly, the roundtable's always been about a 60-40 split in favour of females. We've always had kind of more women joining the roundtable than men. And I put it down to the fact that often it's because, you know, those voices are maybe the least heard. And actually today it was almost about a 90-95% female uptake rather than male. And I think that maybe speaks a lot about the nature of the topic we're discussing today, which is a real shame. Michelle has said in the chat there that it's easier for it to be brushed under the carpet and not dealt with, and it makes you question yourself. And Sharon, here's you, Natasha. Hony, I'm going to pass back to you for the presentation, but I just want to say thank you to everyone who's shared already, because as someone who's dealt with a number of bullying issues myself through a number of different businesses, it's often, like I say, it's yourself that you question first, and that's a horrible, horrible feeling. Hony, over to you. You're on mute still, sorry.
Yeah, thank you for all of you sharing, because I know, you know, some of you probably want to share as well, because it's really difficult when even talking about it, because I know whenever I think about those organizations, I felt bullied, and I felt like it really, even now I'm feeling it, so I can understand that doesn't go away that quickly, isn't it, that feeling? Because, you know, you feel angry, upset, you powerless, you didn't do anything. You know, it's very few people manage to challenge and do something about it. So it's I would say it's a lot of courage we need to tackle these issues as well. And so that's why we need to have these sort of conversations, so we know we can actually do something about it. Okay, so I did some research. So I found this interesting model of 4 stages of culture. So there's a book called Organizational Cultures, Toxic Organizational Cultures and Leadership, How to Build, Sustain Healthy Workplace Bases on Headshake. So I don't know whether you heard about this writer. So it's a model that says the toxic cultures and leadership comes with 4 stages in the evolution of a toxic culture, typically triggered by pressures of performance. Obviously, now I can sort of relate to housing under numerous pressures at the moment, and I'm thinking this could be happening everywhere, or most of the places, silently and not silently. Because you've seen recently, I don't know, you read in Inside Housing houses are under numerous pressures, frontline staff, and because they are dealing with day in, day out difficult situations, and are we supporting our frontline colleagues as well? So it's become like first stage, toxic leadership becomes tolerated, first level. Then it becomes the demand for loyalty and alignment intensifies. Then it comes to a stage, external stakeholders revere the organization's achievements. Then the 4th stage is like a culture of singularity emerges, and it become like norm. And then organization, even unnoticed, these are happening. So one thing is clear is the toxic drivers of toxic cultures are growing acceptance, and usually it's the toxic leader as well. So it's really correlated. So you might remember some of the organization, when you think about the leader could be the problem, not necessarily always, could be, you know, fair bullying also can happen as well. So it's something, I don't know whether you felt or seen. So obviously we need to create healthy workplaces, because otherwise our colleagues can't enjoy this job. Means if you're not creating happy staff, you're not getting happy customers. So there's a big relationship as well. Okay, and as you probably know, some leaders take all the credits when things are really going well, and when things are going wrong, they obviously they pass the blame to somebody else. So those are you probably can think a leader, I know someone like that. So it can happen to the workplace as well. Okay, so just moving to the next slide. I did some research and found 1,000 people were surveyed, and it's as you can see, when somebody's been bullied, it's not just one area of bullying. It's gaslighting, microaggression, blaming, discounting, excluding, and they all really like high proportion as well. So you might see it's not just one thing, people are feeling it. So it's I don't know whether you're familiar with the word gaslighting. Is like you're experiencing something, like someone make you feel like it's not real, you're making it up. Again, it's a bit more like a psychological abuse, I would say. Again, the perpetrator could be doing they want to make you feel that, or they're probably not aware of it, that you're feeling it. So I had to recently investigate a staff member complained about microaggression. When I looked into it, obviously people didn't realize that person was impacted this way. So I just want to say, even if you're thinking it's something small, this could be really big for the person who is going through. And you can imagine they will lose all the confidence. They don't want to come to work events, and they don't want to face anyone. And again, it's impact the whole the culture of the organization, and also the our performance as well. So you can imagine how they perform in workplace, and it's an impact the family as well. So it's not just the workplace is being impacted.
This was backed up with something in the chat, actually. Becky Sutton had put there that she'd been bullied by someone in a very high managerial position, and they bullied a variety of the management team. She fell into depression because of it, felt like I had to work more hours, which then impacted on my personal life. And everyone else was also scared of this person. We all felt we had to do what we were told, otherwise we were put in a position to be humiliated in front of everyone else by being in meetings and being told what we have done wrong, so everyone knew. And as Natasha said there, you know, that person isn't a leader and isn't what you would call a leader. But in housing, in businesses which support housing, these traits are commonplace. And I think that idea of leading by force is still unfortunately something that we see an awful lot of. Never mind the microaggressions and the blaming, but this culture just of, you know, do as you're told and get on with it is almost what's expected, no matter how, you know, how unrealistic sometimes those expectations are.
Thank you, Matt. And as I said, you know, it's you can see from the reaction, it's the problem still exists. It's not going to go away until we deal with it. And that's why in my view, it should start with the creating the right culture in the organization. So it's really start from the top. So an ethical culture is not, I would say, it's not nice to have. It must be the top agenda. Obviously, for the board and the senior leadership, lead by example is really fundamental. Obviously, if you go into a boardroom and you've been bullied by your board members, be more likely the CEOs and leadership team come out and do the same to your team. So it's that create the ripple impact for everyone. So it's really something the board need to be pay attention to. So that's, as a board member, as chair, that's something I'm trying to be, you know, always conscious. Obviously, we need to improve our performance, we need to deliver, but it has to be in an ethical way. So in my view, so first of all, the leaders need to determine the purpose and values. What is expected of an organization is essential. So the senior leaders and board can lead by example. So leaders need to set objectives and strategies, make it really clear what is expected to deliver, and check whether you've got an organization, you've got the right structure, right people, the right systems and processes, and things are in place. You can't really expect you to make all those changes and improvements without giving the tools for the staff as well. So really understand, before we expect, you know, performance shift, are we listening to our staff, what they're saying, especially frontline staff and our customers as well. So it's all about that listening and learning and leading. So it's yeah, we can improve. But often, as you know, we spend an awful lot of time dealing with complaints and negative things because we are not paying attention to things people are saying. So in my view, it has to start from the top. So once the management and senior leadership start acting better, that's an example and tone for the organization. More likely, there's people in, you know, team leaders or managers, they feel like, okay, I can see my manager approachable, they understand. Obviously, they make people accountable. And so that setting the right tone for the organization as well. So that's,
I know when we ran the roundtable live at Housing 2023, we talked about how culture, recruitment, retention, and customer service are this intertwined service that you know, all of them combine continuously in order to make change. So I completely agree with that. I'm going to bring Natasha in just based on your last slide there, Hony. Natasha, do please come in.
I think I totally agree with what you're saying, Hony, but what you find is that a majority of the people that are doing the bullying are at the top. And if you make a complaint or you try to, you know, get the matter resolved, you find that they then try to ruin your reputation, not only within the company, but with others as well. So you kind of, how do you change the culture from those people at the very top and in the, you know, exec director levels, CEO levels, even as we had where someone else was, you know, bullied by their own senior manager in HR. You know, HR is supposed to be there to protect you in the workplace. So when you find that it's coming from the top, how do you address that? Because the majority of it is coming from the top and then it filters its way down, doesn't it, really? So how do we get that out of the workplace? Because it's just becoming more and more common. And then people try to stop your career progression. You find that's another thing because everyone knows each other in the sector as well. There's things that there's a knock-on effect. So what do we do to change that? How can we change it? Sorry, I know it's a difficult question.
No,
but
it isn't. But I hear
very
of,
relative in that way.
This is exactly it. I get so many people approach me saying, hey, Matt, I know you're not recruiting for it, but I've seen a job here. Do you know anything about it? And I will speak to people in terms of confidentially, and I'll go back, and the amount of places that I know of that I just wouldn't recommend people go to. And like you say, a lot of that is top-down culture. And if, you know, just going to the chat, Tony's mentioned there from working in IT is, I don't want it right, I want it Friday. So just get me something down. Angela totally agrees with what you said there. Linda said it's a difficult but really important question. And Sharon's mentioned it. I completely agree. It comes from the top. And people who are acting in this way seem to go on to higher levels. And Liz backs you up too. And Hony, I know when we were speaking about this initially, this was exactly what you were saying, was it's this culture top down is the biggest problem.
Yeah, it's obviously, if the CEO is causing problem, then you would say, who do I go to? Because often the CEO manages the HR team, and the HR got a bit powerless. And how do you get that? Because I spoke to a head of HR recently when I said, oh, I'm talking about this topic, and can you give me some tips or something? Then she said, actually, honey, I was a senior HR manager somewhere, and I was being bullied, and I had to quit the job. And I can imagine, obviously, if the HR feeling bullied, where do they go? And then if the CEO is a bully, then where do they go? So obviously, this is where the board need to be really pay attention. And that's why I always say, you know, the chair and the board need to be more closer to staff and customers, so you can actually see things. Obviously, I'll come to some good points as well where we can pay attention. Natasha, you know, I totally agree. I would say it's obviously, you know, you do need to follow a process, so which I'll come to that. I know how many people would take that courage and talk about it, because you don't want to upset your manager in case, you know, they mark your card as red ticket, you know, they want you out of the organization. That maybe they're thinking. But also sometimes, is these leaders, are they even aware of they making them feel, you know, how do you get that 360-degree feedback to them and say, actually, there is a problem here? And so we'll come to that in a minute. So it's a big issue. So has anyone managed to challenge their leaders?
I'm just going to
And
bring Hazel in on that, on that last point, and then we'll dive on to the next one, because I saw Hazel had raised her hand, and then we'll dive in. I imagine Natasha's going to come back in. So Hazel, I'll go to you.
I am.
Natasha, and then the chat. So Hazel, to you first.
Thanks, Matt. Actually, Hony, it really leads on to what you're just about to talk about, actually, because I think the process, when you do have a concern that you want to raise, is a grievance. And that whole process in itself is so challenging and so difficult, and not everybody survives it, because you start on an informal, and then you go to, if you don't agree with the outcome, it then goes to formal. And although it's meant to be a really supportive process, by nature, I think a lot of people feel that the pressure from just even taking that really brave step to start looking at that is just enormous. And that on top of your day job, which is already going to be likely quite stressful. And like other people have said, you have to prove your worth. You've still got to do the day job. You have to do your investigation. You have to be on the ball. You feel like you're under scrutiny. It's a really tough gig. And then you might take the risk of being paid off at the end of it. You know, and that's not why you started your process in the first place. You want to stay in the organization and do the job you love. That's just, you know, some thoughts that I have around how the processes are.
Thank you, Hazel. One of the things I notice is when someone put a claim or complaint, we're seeing a lot of the time, oh, let's get them sign a confidential agreement, you know, pay some money. And so you're really paying off bad bullying behaviors, really. So instead of actually, you know, we need to really sort this out once and for all. So, you know, this is something we need to tackle. Some organizations really keep a blind eye, and that's why this needs to be talked. And I hope this is just the start of a conversation. We really need to look at each organization and say, am I bullying my staff, or am I seeing something? It's not even you impacted, your colleagues may be going through. Have you seen any signs? Are they okay? Especially now, we're working in, you know, home and different places. We probably don't even know others how people are feeling. And so it's really important to really check on our colleagues and say, are they okay? Even because everyone feeling that pressure for improving performance, various tasks you need to achieve, and it's obviously it's not easy, but I'm sure there must be a different way of getting work done rather than bully someone, because it's not going to make anyone better. So I'm going to look at some of
Can I just bring Natasha back in just on her final point there?
Thanks, Matt.
One, that's all right.
Just a quick one. Sorry, Hony. I totally agree. I can give you my experience when I did actually report it formally. even though I was blamed for it, I even got told the following sentence: "It's all smoke and mirrors, Natasha." And I was like, what do you mean? You know, and I thought, are you kidding me? But also at the same time, that very high up exec director decided to restructure the service and demote me as a result of me complaining. So that was their outcome to my result of me complaining, of being bullied, not only by them, and it was investigated and so forth. And like you said, it's a very emotional, difficult process, which like I said, it impacted me immensely, and my mental health, my personal lifestyle, you know, my personal relationships, everything, where it led me to leaving. But at the same time, at leaving, they done the exact same thing, the settlement agreement, you know, the confidentiality agreement. And that seems to be the go-to. They don't want to resolve it. A lot of these high up CEOs and directors don't want to acknowledge it. I mean, one organization I worked for has been found institutionally racist. And when it was reported, the racism, what did they do to the members who all reported the racism? Signed them off, got them to sign the agreement, and there you go. It's all gone from our hands, nothing's there. However, they were still found to be very institutionally racist, but nothing's been done about that. The same people who are accused of the racism are still working there. So how are we going to move forward in those situations? Because it's not just myself. I know many people who have made formal complaints, and I'm sure many people in this call have, and it's resulted in no action, or they're most probably being paid off to go as well, or demoted. You know, to demote me from a head of service to a senior officer was like, that's 3 steps down. So that was it was very obvious, it was targeted, you know. So, and people have that power to do that.
They do.
Yeah. Thank you, Natasha. That's really very disappointing to hear these are still happening and we are not able to challenge them. But that's why we want to challenge these scenarios, and we're going to accept it. So it's, again, as I said, it's important the board level need to be aware of what's really going on in the organization. There are some ways, obviously, we can look at that. So obviously, I'm going to share so how can leaders recognize and address toxic workplaces? So obviously leaders, I include the board as well, because obviously I know the board do look at the reports. So obviously do take a look at your organization values. The first thing I would say, I remember, I know Linda's here, when I worked for CDS, one of the things we always talk about is the values, and especially Linda's favorite one was the kindness. And I can say, I haven't seen anywhere that value. So it's looking at the values. So if you're really talking about high performing is a value, then you need to think how are you actually driving the high performance? Are you going to do an ethical way? Or how are you going to support you? Or is it bullying behavior you're going to create? So you really need to watch when you create those values. So as board and senior team need to look at, see whether it would make it better for staff, or rather than make it difficult. So second thing I would say is what's for early warning signs by measuring the toxicity. So obviously engagement surveys, I know we do staff surveys, I would say it's every quarter, do a survey as anonymous as possible, rather than say, oh, each department, each team, each age. So if you have a team with 2 people, you know that, you know, so and so is so people are not going to say something freely. So maybe we now and then we need to do something, really make it anonymous, so we can actually see how people are feeling. Is there any underlying issues we need to pick up? Any undesirable behaviors are coming? And the other thing I would say is attention to absenteeism in certain teams and departments, and turnover and complaints. Obviously, you would say one of the things I always look at is staff turnover for organization. That shows, if we say it's 20% or more, or 30% or more, then you think, what's really going on there? You know, there must be something you can learn. I know you can look at the Glassdoor and various other places, you can check feedback. So do need to pay attention to that and see what staff are saying. Look for good and bad managers. A survey says, your survey, Gallup survey said 50% of the respondents had left a job to get away from a bad manager. So obviously, that's a high proportion of, you know, even today we heard, you know, Natasha said, you know, she was demoted, you know, in her role. So obviously nobody is going to stay around for an organization when they're treating you like that. So It's estimated bullying and harassment costs the UK taxpayer more than 2.2 billion per annum. That's a lot of money. And you can imagine how people feeling. It's not just about the money, how people feeling, the impact, you know, the feelings doesn't go away. It takes ages to forget that experience. So when you do appoint managers, you know, you need to make sure you do the formal training and guidance. You would not let anyone to drive your car without instruction. A bit like that, you put a team leader, you didn't give any training, so they probably don't know how to manage staff. So it also is important, we need to make sure all our staff and managers have the right training so they can understand creating that impactful good culture as well. So also promote individuals who really lead by examples. I know a lot of organizations set the objectives, but same way you also measure their behaviors, how they did in that task as well. Again, leadership programs and things like that to foster a positive work environment is important. So the other thing I would say is make toxic behavior unacceptable. It's really keeping I think it was, I can't remember, was it Claire? Someone said about the process, policies, disciplinary grievance policies are really explicit. We're not going to tolerate this behavior, and there will be a process. And code of conduct is really critical documents, everyone understand it. And some of you said is the leaders need to really read that first, because they are the ones most of the time can be bullies as well. So there are some really good managers and leaders. I'm not saying all the managers and leaders are bullies. It could be a very small proportion. And sometimes, as I said, sometimes people are not even aware of they're making people feel like that as well.
There's a lot of points coming up in the chat. Avina said that when you have toxic superstars who seem to be producing great results, they almost become untouchable. I've seen this in the recruitment world countless times. I know many people in the housing world who've told me that, you know, these behaviors are going on, but because they're so good at their job or they bring in so much money or whatever it will be, then they can do whatever they like. Sabani, the board should always play the role of a challenging friend to the CEO and hear the unsaid. Couldn't agree more. I'm the co-chair of the board for Spring Housing in Birmingham. I'd like to hope, you know, we did a tour of all the services. We've met all the staff. I'd like to hope that if anything was going on, they couldn't feel they could speak to the CEO about, that they could come to myself or the other co-chair, because that's exactly what we're there for. Linda Wallace, my dad used to say that you learn what you live with. So I guess part of our commitment is to try to model different ways of working and to share examples of how we can get great performance without having to resort to these behaviors. I also wonder whether there's room for some sort of cross-organizational allyship for situations where people are being bullied or silenced in their own organization. It can be very, very hard if everyone around you is also afraid of the person or people who are bullying you. And I love that comment, because I think, you know, we talk about this culture of bullying that we've seen is because so many people who go into management, or as you say, Hony, haven't been trained in management, have just seen bullies managing and so go, well, that's how I have to manage because that's the only way you get results. Tony said, couldn't you take that as constructive dismissal? But as Moji's put, she was clever. I was there for 8 months below the threshold. Claire, carrying out employee surveys in a way that is truly anonymous is very challenging, but it can be done. There's a fabulous speaker, Ellie Dowsett, explaining how in a video that she shared. I'll make sure that gets shared around. And actually going back to that point from Module Moji, apologies for pronouncing your name wrong. I was bullied by a chief exec I worked directly with. In 8 months, she did not set any targets or objectives. I had one-to-one. It shook my self-confidence and was an awful experience. As Sharon's mentioned there, Hony, and I think this goes back to you, toxic behavior is a form of abuse. And we see it so often. And I can see Jabeen wants to come in. So Jabeen, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's interesting. We've talked a lot about the leadership, and I think that there's a big gap in leadership training and training people how to engage with other people, how to have difficult conversations, because we do learn that, you know, get it done. And if you're, that's quite a traditional style of leadership, which is like, you know, and I think that there is so much more room now for leaders to develop what you call human skills, or not what we used to call soft skills, but human skills, how to communicate, how to listen, how to have those difficult conversations. And I think that's the real gap with the leadership in our sector at the moment, is that we've become quite stale and lack that cultural competence. I think sometimes as well, where we have a much more diverse workforce than perhaps we used to, and people have different things and they're bringing themselves more to work, you know, we have higher expectations of how we should be treated. And I think there's such a fear. I think there's a fear of, I don't know, being cancelled or being accused that stops leaders from actually addressing the issues. So I think it was Natasha on the calls talking about being bullied from above, and you know, you get it everywhere. So in very recent jobs, I had it from a very senior leader. I raised it, and it was fully ignored, you know, and I went through all the steps, and I was eventually exhausted. I'd tribunal everything, but I was just like, you know, it's exhausting. And I think, and these weren't necessarily bad people. I think they were just scared. So it's like, quick, get them out. You know, I don't want to be accused of being a racist or being accused of being a sexist or whatever. And it was so challenging to try and get people to engage with the conversation, the issue. Like, don't run away or demonize me, or let's actually address it. So I think there's a lot that we need to do more broadly when we're talking about leadership, when we're talking of, you know, how to be a leader, how to engage with people, how. Do you know what I mean? I don't think...
I agree completely. I know.
Yeah, it's not always malicious.
Well, Vena's put in the chat there that she 100% agrees there's a dangerous investment in leadership development. And I mean, I met Vena through working with Bromsgrove District Housing Trust, who have got very good culture, but it's because they've invested in people like Vena. And this isn't me doing a plug at all, but to go in and actually do proper leadership training, properly do a breakdown of where stigma is attached, where maybe your staff have got unconscious biases going on. And then the culture comes down through that. And if you're willing to engage with that, you'll get somewhere. But if you don't, then the culture is very much that either what we've already mentioned, or do as I say, not as I do kind of mindset. Vena, I'll bring you in actually on that. Thanks for raising your hand. And there's loads in the chat, which I'll come back to in a moment. But I'm going to bring Hony back in first, because I know we've got a couple of bits of the presentation. So Vena, Hony, and then I'll jump to the chat.
Thank you. Yes, this is such an important conversation. But, you know, when we talk about investing in leadership development and leadership awareness and all of that great stuff, and it's kind of aligned to the comment I made earlier about toxic superstars as well, because of the pressures that the sector is under, that, you know, naturally the focus is going to be on outcomes. You know, what do the results look like? What do the metrics look like? And so, you know, I've kind of come to the conclusion that if we want our leaders, if we want boards and chief executives to take this stuff seriously, we've got to convince them to buy into this, you know. And ultimately, we're selfish creatures, you know. We need to know what's in it for me. And actually, when you look at the research, when you look at the figures, it's almost a no-brainer. You know, cultures that are inclusive, cultures that take this stuff seriously, actually perform better. But unless we get that buy-in, unless leadership, unless boards understand and accept that actually they stand to gain commercially from taking this seriously, we're going to have this suppressing of this information, you know. And just to pick up on a point that was made earlier, you know, about settlement agreements being used to address these sort of issues. I've seen that happen. I see it happen over and over again. And the really sad thing is, you know, every time one of these, you know, brave people speak up, and certainly in the cases I've been involved in, it's very rare that that's the only case. You know, most of the investigations I'm involved in, I'll start investigating one allegation and 5 others will appear, you know, but actually it happened to me as well. And actually it happened to so-and-so who left. And, you know, and so when we take these things seriously, when we actually look into it rather than paying people off and silencing them, you may well uncover a huge problem. But unless you look into it, you're just going to continue living with it, you know.
Unfortunately, very, very true. Hony, I'm going to bring you back in.
Thank you, Vena. That was really important, and it is true. And a lot of the time, you do that to save some top leader. But sometimes, just get rid of that person is far better. You would have more productive, more happy staff you can retain and recruit. So there's no gain in saving those people. So also we need to educate our employees what the signs, and sometimes we see this often. We don't even realize this is bullying and harassment and microaggression. We're quite used to accepting it, and you think, oh, that's okay. No, it's not okay. So just need to really aware of those signs, and how can we make it really obvious to our staff, and maybe through our lunch and learn sort of sessions, talk about it, and create safe reporting. Someone mentioned this is about, report this, and train our HR colleagues as well how to handle complaints really seriously, ensure there's a protection against retaliation as well. Like Natasha mentioned about, when you complain, then what can happen to my job? How they're going to treat me, and that worries a lot of people. So they probably don't say it. They may silently work there and then quit. So offer trainings on conflict resolution. Sometimes it could be, sorry, it just passed the breakout room. It's not meant to happen. So it's all about understanding and making sure there's policies and procedures in place, making sure we take those seriously, make sure managers have training to challenge and deal with them as well, and in making really clear it's not acceptable, these issues, and again providing support for our staff, because a lot of organizations do have employee support schemes and work-life balance and things like that, counseling service, making sure we use them, not only use them, make sure staff are aware of this as well. These are services aware, and how can we use as well. Some organizations do create like a buddy system to foster a positive relationship and support networks. Again, if you get complaint, deal with it straight away. If you don't deal quickly, it's like, it's not important. And I feel like if it's bullying harassment, then take a formal grievance, and not, I've seen organizations, no, I'm going to have a quiet word with this manager. No, it's not a quiet word. It really need to take formal actions to understand, formal investigation, to understand what's really happened. And it should give a very clear message to the organization. There is no place for bullying in this organization. I was meant to do breakout room, since we've
only got about 5 minutes left, so but there's some questions on the feedback stuff, Hony, just in terms of points for you to raise from the chat. So Linda Wallace has said there's a beautiful book by Catherine Mannix called Listen, which has amazing tips for what she calls tender conversations, not just at work, in life, and she was blown away by it. Ellie Darling, there are some really useful NLP techniques that support communication, understanding, and self-awareness to look into. Joelle, harassment and bullying are such broad terms. Maybe that's some of the problem, that people are not aware of the subtle bullying, such as gaslighting, exclusion, restructuring, no engagement, no support from management, etc. And Natasha's backed that up by saying it's frustrating, as I went on so many leadership courses and even went as far as getting my CMIs to ensure I was a good leader and have difficult conversations. So maybe it's difficult when people have been on those courses and saying, well, you're wrong. But yeah, if your execs haven't been on them going, well, it doesn't matter, that's not how we do it. And I've heard that and seen that in multiple sectors, including housing, of you going away, getting this brilliant information. And then when you come back to your business, suddenly going, yeah, but we don't care. That's not how we do it. What was the point in going on the session in the first place? Tony Bradley has said, I was implementing a system and using key people from user departments to implement their section of the system. And we had an IT guy. This guy caused problems because he thought it should be a different system. Went around telling my team this. I went to my boss and complained about him. She had a word with him, but he didn't change. So I went to the chief
exec, that should be
chief exec and chair of the project board, and told him, and he got him removed. So, but look how many steps you've had to go through to try and get a resolution there. It's wild, Sharon. Yeah. We have to be honest. Many people do not report as they're worried about the future, and that's such a massive one. As Hony mentioned earlier, in this sector, everybody kind of knows everybody. You're about 3 degrees of separation. If you get a name for someone who complains or makes an issue or anything like that, then actually, will you get that next piece of work? And I'd look, anybody who's been through that, please come speak to me, because I guarantee you that your worries that you're having about that business, other people in sectors, you might feel you're not going to get a job, but other people in the sector know that's a toxic place to work. They've heard the stories. So come and talk to people like myself or Vina or Hony or anybody else who can kind of go, look, go to a place with good culture, be honest to an extent. you know, whatever you feel comfortable with. There are always going to be options if you're just willing to leave. It's like leaving a toxic relationship. It's better to leave. Sabani, Hony, you've had wonderful insights. Thank you for creating such an open discussion. And Sharon, for those who are experiencing or have experienced this, there's an impact on a person's physical and mental well-being. You go from being a happy person to a shadow. In my case, my manager told me I was miserable and made her depressed just looking at me. And then comments there in terms of huge amounts of support. And Natasha says, thank you so much, Hony, and everyone else who's attended. I really appreciate today. You have my CIH vote, which is a lovely comment at the end there. Hony, just in terms of, I'm aware we're down to the last couple of minutes, and I always want people, to anybody who hasn't seen it, I put out a feedback post recently, which has only had like 3 responses. If anybody else can come back, brilliant, because I'd love for this to become more, this roundtable, to keep growing. But for that, I need your input. And the one thing somebody said is, so often we get to the end and people have got a number of different things to take away, but not necessarily one thing that go, right, where to start? What do I do now? So if I'm to ask you here, what do people do from here? What would be your advice to anybody who's facing bullying, who's experiencing bullying, or who feels they're in a business which allows bullying to happen?
For the leaders, my message is lead by example, because it's if you want to motivate, bullying is not the way to motivate. So you need to go and get your training done, because you need to learn how to lead people, because it's the modern way of management and leadership is not bullying and putting pressure on people. So my message is to foster a good culture of workplace where zero tolerance on this bullying and issues like that. Make sure you have really good policies and procedures in place. Really train your HR team so they can deal with effectively. And often HR feel powerless if it's the CEO or the bully. Make sure the board is really accessible to the staff so they can really understand. They can talk, because one of the things I'm doing today is I'm going to Eldon, where I'm chairing. We have an event, we're meeting all the staff and customers, and really going to talk to them. So we need to do a lot more of that, being visible and motivate staff really to perform in different other ways, because I know some of people I managed, it is in this room, really want to say, I've managed to somehow motivate them, not by bullying. So it must be some other ways we can actually manage. I know, Linda, you're here, you motivated me, not bullying. So there is way to get performance up. And actually we need to talk about it. It's not a light topic, because I know how I felt when I was going through. So I know this is a hard topic. I think that you've done a great job of raising and giving the platform for us to talk today. I think we should do more of the conversation and give toolkits. Maybe we may need to put together a toolkit for people to really use that as a good way of saying, okay, how do I get this, and how can I get supported as well? So some well-being tips and things like that, and raising awareness as well. Maybe the industry needs to talk a bit more, because we are handling high pressure at the moment. Finally, I want to say thank you so much for everyone for coming. And I can see still most of you are here, still here. Thank you so much. And I know lunchtime taking over. Please vote for me. I'm hoping to make a change in the sector for good, and making the sector a bit more happy place to be for all of us, for customers and staff as well.
What's lovely is I'm
if you're
seeing
not
the
yes
chat.
member, please take.
I was saying that there's so many things in the chat there, Hony, coming through. People saying thank you. This has made a real difference. Some people messaging me directly as well, saying this has made a huge difference. So thank you for bringing this to the table today. As you and I have discussed before, quite often when housing, we tiptoe around the difficult subjects. We talk around the things that we know, and then anything a bit more challenging we kind of avoid. And that's one of the points in the roundtable, is to make sure we embrace these head on. So thank you so much for today. As I say, if you want to reach out to Hony to talk about her campaign, please do. There's a few events coming up. So, I'll probably be seeing Hony, I imagine, at the CIH event in September, the Southwest event, the Hive Live. If you're going, if you're interested in data and the housing side of data, the Hive Live is in September on the 25th. That's with Claire Patterson, who's literally just had to bounce. And there's the Housing Data and Analytics Summit in November. The reason I'm plugging those 3 is because I'm at them. Yay. But realistically, the key thing is that everywhere I go, I'm just going to be trying to make sure we're challenging and really having the difficult conversations. And Hony, bringing this today was absolutely vital. So thank you, and the best of luck with the whole campaign. For now, thank you everybody who could join us today. Hony, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you if they'd like to?
Yeah, it's maybe better LinkedIn, and I'm happy to put my email address as well here. So, or even call me, because I wish I've shared my number to everyone. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
You're very, very
Have
welcome.
a great afternoon. Take care.
All right, take care, everybody. Bye then.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.